Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with How I Discovered Bruckner. Yeah, the big B. And this is a really weird story. I mean, it's very, very funny. I actually heard Bruckner a long time before I heard like normal composers. I must have been about 10 or 11. Couldn't have been more. And I've told this story before in general, in the sense that a lot of my early recording discoveries were thanks to Goodwill Industries, the charitable concern that sold, used everything from clothing to, to audio equipment to, games and toys and all kinds of stuff. And they had a record section in good old Milford. They were in downtown Milford at the time. They were next to the fire station, which made it an easy bike ride from my house. I mean, now they're in a much more, spiffy facility next to Costco on the Boston Post Road. But back then, it was just a really sort of a rundown little building next to the firehouse. And I would pedal down there with my shekels, that I made from cutting a lawn or, selling peaches from our peach tree or washing cars. And I would spend the money on LPs because they cost a dime. I remember they were a dime each. And the weirdest stuff turned out, it was in this stack of LPs. I mean, that's how I got my early Dvorak symphonies with like Carol Shana and things like that. They had that stuff. Where it came from and how it got to Milford, Connecticut, I have no clue. But it was there. And one of the things that was there was Bruckner's Fifth Symphony. Now, of all the symphonies to start with on Bruckner, the fifth, the weirdest, most echt Brucknerish symphony that ever existed, there it was. And I didn't get it because I wanted Bruckner. I didn't know who Bruckner was. I had no idea who Bruckner was. It was on Urania, and it was conducted by Gerhard Pfluger. I think he was conducting like the Leipzig Philharmonic Orchestra, not the Leipzig, Gewandhaus or anything like that. It was something in Leipzig. And it was just cool looking because it came in those days. Remember, they came in like deluxe packaging. It had this box. It was a 2 LP set, 2 full LPs, which I thought was fascinating all by itself. I mean, what is this behemoth, right? And it was in a box, and the box had like a wooden spine running through it, and it was really deluxe looking. I mean, it was a little beat up because it was at Goodwill. It was used and sort of fraying at the edges, but still, it had once been luxurious. So I snatched it up for a dime. I mean, I figured, what the heck? So I brought the thing home, and I didn't have a stereo. I had like a close and play. I had one of these plastic portable turntable for kids, mono, one speaker coming up. And I think it was a mono recording anyway. I mean, who knew? And I looked at this thing, and it had fabulous notes printed on the inside of the box. You open up the box, and on both covers, you had the spindle with the LPs in paper sleeves that you could turn gatefold wise like a book. And then there was this unbelievably long analysis of the thing, and a quotation from Gerhard Pfluger, conductor extraordinaire and ex-Nazi, like so many of them were. And it said, "I have dedicated my life to Anton Bruckner." And I remember thinking, who the hell is Bruckner that you should be dedicating your life to him? I mean, come on. Really? But there it was. And I read the analysis, and I played the thing, and I just had no clue what was going on. It went on forever and ever. And it was crazy. But what stuck in my head, I mean, really stuck in my head, 2 things. First of all, the strange discontinuity of the music. The fact that it stopped, it started, and these big climaxes that went nowhere, and these silences and pauses. And I'm thinking to myself, what the hell is it? Number one. And number 2, what stuck in my head was, ba-da-da-da-dum, ya-da-dum, ba-dum. I couldn't get it out of my head. And that was something I noticed about Bruckner from the beginning when I listened to other things, is that he had the ability to write these little melodic cells that were really, really catchy, and you really, they were very, very captivating, I thought. But what he did with them, it was weird. I mean, because there was no way to predict what was going to happen. It would go and it would stop, and then it would just end, and But those little cells stuck in my brain. And so I listened to the whole thing, and I didn't listen to it for quite a long time because it was very long and time consuming. And there were bits I just didn't get. The slow movement seemed to be just endless and boring. And the scherzo I liked, you know, do, 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 do. I realized immediately that it was the same tune that began the slow movement, but then you had to hear it twice. And that middle section, do, 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 again, it was like dead spot, big dead spot. And the finale, oh God, the finale. I mean, this fugue, this thing. I mean, I didn't know it was a fugue. All I knew is that it wouldn't stop. It just kept going and going and going and going. And then at the very end, just when you were ready to, like, you know, kick your close and play down the stairs into the basement, all of a sudden you heard da, 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 da. I was like, yay, there it is again. I mean, you hear it a little bit at the beginning too, but of that movement. So that was Bruckner's Fifth. And it struck me very forcibly. I didn't dislike it. I was amazed at it and not entirely comfortable with it. And so I put it aside. So then the next Bruckner that I heard was the Seventh, which of course is quite different from the Fifth. And that recording was a cheapy, you know, $2 disc I got in the budget bin. I think at the Yale Co-op, actually, when I was shopping for some sort of stuff there, like a T-shirt or a sweatshirt or something when I was about, you know, 12 or 13. I would go to the Co-op with Mom, and I would look at the records, and it was Hans Rosbaud on Turnabout. Remember Turnabout Vox? Cheap, very, very cheap on one disc, with the slow movement split, the adagio split over the side turn. And there again, it was one of those experiences. I mean, the opening was very, very pretty, but I thought to myself, oh boy, this is slow. I mean, boy, this isn't going to go anywhere, is it? But it had some beautiful moments. And I remember, again, the finale, do, do, ba-do, ba-do, do, do, which is a little bit like do, 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 do. And I thought to myself, oh, he's really good at writing these jerky, jumpy little motive thingies that pop up all over the place, isn't he? You know, do, 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 you know, that kind of stuff in the scherzo. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it very much. I thought it was very, very captivating and completely different from anything else I'd ever heard. And then, of course, I read something somewhere about it because I was like looking into it at that point, thinking, boy, this guy's interesting. That there was supposed to be a cymbal crash, which Rosbaud didn't do. And I was very disappointed because I wanted the cymbal crash. I really did. Even in those days, I was a percussionist in training. And I thought to myself, you know, why would anyone make a fuss over a cymbal crash? I mean, what's the big deal? Just do it, for heaven's sake, and don't make an issue. Because what I read was like there's this whole thing about was it authentic, was it not authentic? And then the whole issue of Bruckner editions began to creep into me. And I even said then, and I was 10 or 11 years old, and I remember saying to myself, oh boy, this is going to be a problem. And sure enough, so it has turned out to be, right? I mean, you know, the whole business of Bruckner editions and all that crap, I was inaugurated into at a very young age, and I was totally, completely already not interested in having to deal with it. I just wanted to listen to music and listen to a fine performance. So I knew at that point that the Rosbaud edition, which was also very cheap and on a Grati pressing, did not have the cymbal crash. And so I knew I had to get another one, and I had to get one that had the cymbal crash. The problem was all of those other ones were just far too expensive. I mean, they were on 2 discs as well, and I couldn't afford them. No way could I afford them. So it was quite a few years till I got another Bruckner symphony. And at that point, I got the 7th again, and I got Karajan. And it had the cymbal crash. I was like, yay, that's the cymbal crash that everybody's talking about. And I was like, I felt somehow that I was far more authentic than any of the other people I ever knew who'd ever heard of the word Bruckner. Of course, I didn't know anybody else who'd ever heard of the name Bruckner. I was it in my neighborhood. I'm quite sure of that. But there you go. That was how I discovered Bruckner. And from that point on, it was a slow process of absorption of each work as it came. I did not begin with the Romantic, with the 4th Symphony, as so many people do or are told to. And I think, frankly, because it was my own experience, it's a lot more fun to start with the tough ones. start with the fifth. If you could deal with the fifth, you could deal with anything. I mean, let's face it. I've always had a strong attachment to the fifth, not just because of its initial dramatic idea there, which I just is still stuck in my head, but because it's such an unusually weird piece. It's like nothing else anybody else wrote. And that's what I liked. That's what I like to hear. I like to hear differences in music. I didn't ever want more of the same old, same old. I wanted to hear something that was completely different from everything else. And that's just a predilection on my part. Other people may be different. A lot of people want music that sounds like what's familiar or what they know they like. And I understand that. I really do. There's nothing wrong with it, of course. But I wanted to hear what you could do with this unbelievable organism called the orchestra. And what Bruckner did with it is unlike what anyone else ever did with it. And the more he sounded like himself and the less he sounded like everybody else, the more fun I had trying to dig into it and ferret out what was going on. So that was my introduction to Bruckner at a very, very young age and in a very odd way. And way before I knew, the standard classics, even Beethoven and Brahms and Bach and those people, I knew these pieces by Bruckner. And would I say I was a big fan? No, but I appreciated their individuality. I really did. And I still do. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Tell me about your first experience of Bruckner. Take care.